Okay, so just real quick, go ahead, give me your name and a little bit of your personal background.
My name is Holland Jones, and I'm running for Fort Bend County Sheriff 2020. I've been in law enforcement about 21 years, and I am a licensed attorney. I practice family law, and I have a PhD in administration of justice. And let me see, there's a couple things I want to do with the Fort Bend County SO. What else? What else would you like to know?
Well, what have you done as far as law enforcement instruction? I know that you're part of, was it CLEAT?
Well, I'm a part of CLEAT, the Combined Law Enforcement Organization, and I'm a part of TMPA. And so...
Okay, so the TMPA is the Texas Municipal Police Officers Association.
Yes,
okay, yeah, you have to say that for people because a lot of people won't know what that is. Okay.
No, it's interesting because sometimes we use these acronyms and we expect people to understand it, but they really don't.
Right. You're talking to laymen, so.
Right. No, I'm getting it. What I've done in law enforcement, I have been a reserve deputy, I've been a sergeant on patrol, I've been a lieutenant, I've been a captain, I was an assistant chief at my agency. So I've worked in every facet of the law enforcement agency, at least on a county level. I'm a captain at this point. With over 21 years of experience. I'm a master peace officer, and I right now teach police officers how to be police with arrest, search and seizure, de-escalation, any type of mental health issues, civilian interaction training. So I do a lot. I'm a college professor, graduate school level. I've taught many cops, and I spent a couple years teaching at Sam Houston State University in their Department of Criminal Justice. So it's been a long career.
Okay, and now you want to step up to the big time, right?
I'm gonna try to.
Okay, what is your party affiliation?
I am a Democrat.
You're a Democrat. Now there are some other Democrats that are jockeying for this position as well.
Well, let me answer that. We are not running against each other. We are running with each other to make sure that the citizens of Fort Bend County have the ability to vet and select the person that they feel is the most qualified for the job.
Okay, sounds good. All right, so let's see. First subject, let's start with no-knock warrants. So you've seen what's just happened in Houston over the last 6-7 months.
Yes.
With the no-knock warrant on the Tuttle's home and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so this has become that has brought this to the forefront of concern for a lot of citizens.
Mm-hmm.
What would you do along the lines of handling no-knock warrants? What would be your policy?
All right, so the first thing we have to make sure that we determine when utilizing a no-knock warrant policy is we have to make sure we understand what is the premise behind a no-knock. First, in order for you to get a no-knock warrant from a judge, you have to, by a preponderance of the evidence, demonstrate that a couple things. You have to demonstrate that the police officers or someone's life may be in damage when they in danger when they make entry. That's the first thing. Or the occupants or the objects of the search warrant will be lost, destroyed, or removed. And so it's a tactical decision of the incident commander, the person that's about to execute the warrant. So what the courts have said is that there's no specific policy or statute that either grants a no-knock or prohibits a no-knock. So a couple things that I want to do. First, I want to make sure that we meet our burden with the court. That's first things first. Number two, I want to make sure that we have a quality control mechanism in place to review and make sure that each one of those no-knock warrants not only meet judicial standards, but meet our departmental standards. So we don't have an incident in Fort Bend County like what transpired in the city of Houston. To help us mitigate that, it's a couple things that I'm going to make sure that we do if I'm elected. I'm going to make sure that we have body cameras for every warrant execution period. I actually have a nice little philosophy on this. No vest, no work. No body camera, no warrant execution. So if you don't have a body camera, if you don't have a warrant that's approved not only judicially but departmental wise, or you don't have a body worn camera, you will not execute a no-knock warrant. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't say this, that what is a requirement for every warrant evaluation is when those police officers are about to execute their warrant, that they are required by case law to conduct what we call a threshold reappraisal, where they take a second and go over those facts contained in the warrant to make sure that they're not stale facts or they're still up to date. So if for some reason those facts are skewed or outdated, then your no-knock warrant may not be as good as what you think it is. So I'm going to make sure that we have quality control from the supervisory level, that all of my incident responders are have an expertise in the field of executing warrants, and that we make sure that prior to a no-knock entry, that we have made an independent determination that it is still required because our lives may be at risk, or our officers or the subject matter of the warrant may be destroyed, lost, or removed.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, sometimes these addresses get messed up and you end up at the wrong house, and this is one of the issues with no-knock warrants.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it's an unintentional accident. We get
Right.
that. You know, Williams Way versus Williams Street.
Yes.
We got it. But unfortunately, the brunt of the force ends up upon the citizens
Mm-hmm.
who have no clue what's going on. So I think that no-knock warrants are a bad idea.
Mm-hmm.
Although I agree, in some instances,
Mm-hmm.
they are necessary evil.
Well, and I also want to say this. Now, I'm not aware of all the facts and circumstances surrounding that particular situation, so I want to be mindful. One, I want to make sure that I have a condolences for those people that lost their lives and their families. Number two, that we in the law enforcement community, we have an obligation to make sure that that doesn't happen again, and so that we need to put stopgap measures in place to ensure that it doesn't happen, and that the staff that you recruit, hire, and train or promote are versed, is exactly like I am, with the no-knock requirement and the ability to say yes or no. Now, I also want to say this with the no-knock. In some situations, the first responder or the individual in charge of the execution of that warrant could say, hey, look, I know we got a no-knock, but this is actually a safe place. You know, facts change. So that incident commander should have the ability to say, hey, look, we're not going to execute a no-knock. We're going to execute the warrant, but we're going to give them time to come to the door. We're going to knock, announce ourselves, and then follow policies and procedures. I think that it'll be required that we have the ability to review by body-worn camera footage. And I'm not just talking about the entry team. I'm talking about anybody outside waiting, or the process and everything to be recorded. So, and this is important. We want to make sure that we have transparency. We want to make sure that we're accountable, and that anything that we've done, that we can show some accountability. And so we have to do these things moving forward. We learned from that. So as a law enforcement community, we need to make some adjustments. And if I'm elected as Fort Bend County Sheriff, that's exactly what I'm going to do.
I think that's good. But you're talking about the entry teams wearing body-worn cameras. How do you feel about body-worn cameras in general, or regular patrol officers?
Oh, you know what? This is how I feel. No vest, no work. No body cam, no work.
Okay, I agree with you. The camera doesn't lie.
Right.
And I think that's a great thing to have. It's a great tool to have. It is literally has saved my life quite a few times.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, so how about gun control? What's your stance on gun control?
Well, I do have an interesting stance that when you analyze gun control from a law enforcement managerial perspective, I think that it is one of those situations where you can have over-regulation and over-regulation. Over-regulation is when the people that should have the right to carry their weapons or guns and to protect themselves and protect their families are impeded or frustrated from exercising that right. So then there are some situations where we have under-regulation, where we have individuals that are not only experience a mental health crisis, but in conjunction to experiencing that mental health crisis, they actually have a substantial propensity for violence. When you put those two together, and we don't have any regulations in play, it could, it could cause some issues. So what I would like to see is a case-by-case analysis, but this leads me into what they call as constitutional carry, where people have the right without licensure or permit to carry a weapon to protect themselves, because they're victims. The bad guys don't play. They carry weapons, and if you have a law enforcement community that is not respectful of the Second Amendment, or it's somehow degraded or eroded, then we really put our law-abiding citizens, the people that elect us, the people that support us, we put them in harm's way. So to answer your question, I am for some regulation when it poses an immediate danger to the health, welfare, and safety of my constituents, my citizens. But for the most part, I think that people should have the right to carry their weapons.
So you would support constitutional carry?
Yes, sir.
Absolutely. Okay. That's good coming from a Democrat. Most Democrats are not quite so liberal on gun control.
I totally understand it.
Okay, so you mentioned, you touched on the mental health issue.
Yes.
So I think that there is a real problem with people who need mental health and dealing, their interaction with law enforcement.
Right.
And it comes, again, when we spoke before this interview started about training, or the lack thereof. And we're seeing, just video after video of people with mental illnesses that are not understood by the police.
Right.
And they end up getting beat up, sometimes killed,
Yes, sir.
because they do something that the officer perceives as wrong. What can we do, in your opinion, or what would you do to institute or get training and understand? I understand, and a lot of people understand, that funding is always a problem when it comes to training.
Well, you know what? Look, I'm not a politician, so I have to say what's on my heart and what's on my mind. If you do not properly train your people because of a budget issue, you're either going to pay now or you're going to pay later. So to answer your question, what I'm going to do in my Community Changes Everything initiative is that, and it's listed on my website, Holland Jones 4, the number 4, Sheriff.
And I'll link that in the description of this video so that everybody can go to your website.
Thank you. And if you guys decide to go to my website, you can look where I have outlined the job requirements for sheriff, sergeant, lieutenant, captain, and executive command staff. In every single one of my gold badges, if you're a supervisor of any respect, if I am elected sheriff, you will have a 40-hour mandatory mental health certification, because we need to be able to identify our people. We need to be able to detect when an individual or one of our employees are experiencing a mental health crisis, and we need to take the appropriate action. Guys, we cannot arrest ourselves out of a social problem. And so it takes a law enforcement that's firm but compassionate, that understand the needs of its community. And we have a large mental health community or individuals that would need a little bit of help, and we have a large veteran population as well. So we need to take those things in consideration when we're trying to administer justice. And as hopefully, if you guys decide that I am worthy of your support, this is exactly what I'm going to do. Every single gold badge in my department will be mental health certified, so that you don't have to worry about if we come across you and you have a bad day, that your citizens or your family or you or your daughter, your wife, your son will not be treated inappropriately because our officers are not properly trained.
I like that you said you pay now for the training or pay later in the lawsuits.
And if I could say
Sure.
something else about that.
Go ahead.
There's no reason why we should a department as large as Fort Bend County Sheriff Office should have any lack of training. They have their own police academy. So to have your own police academy and then your personnel may be deficient in certain levels of training, that's an issue that I think any law enforcement executive should consider to be something we need to work on together.
Very good. Here in Fort Bend County, we have had trouble with speeding deputies,
Right.
specifically out there on Williams Way. Are you familiar? You know where the
Yes.
sheriff's department is, going back towards 59?
Yes.
There's a school zone there.
Yes.
And this has been a recurring theme with Sheriff Nels, the current sheriff, and his deputies. It is so bad that you've got citizens out there and off-duty police officers from other agencies with radar guns catching the officer speeding.
Yes.
There's actually a channel, News Now Fort Bend County, or News Now Fort Bend. That's all he does, is that school zone. And it is just speeding deputy after speeding deputy after speeding deputy. Now what started to occur is, as citizens have called in and complained, the deputies have begun to disable the GPS in their vehicles so that the supervisors can't look and see their speeds. Now, what would you do about that? We know what the number one killer of police officers in America is. Well, let's just say bad driving.
Okay,
Let's call it bad driving.
that.
It's not always
I'll
speed,
buy
because
that.
sometimes it's running a red light, but
No
it's a
seatbelt.
hazard. It's a hazard not only to them, because a lot of times they hit one of us. So it's a hazard to everybody. And there is an initiative, the Under 100 initiative, which
Yes,
I support, do videos about a lot. What is your stance going to be on speeding deputies?
All right, so let's address this as a formal complaint. First of all, because the sheriff office is under Chapter 143 of the Texas Local Government Code, there's a procedure that is by statute that we have to follow when anyone files a complaint against a police officer in which that police officer could be subject to discipline. And so every supervisor will be responsible for enforcing the policies and procedures, and especially the Texas Transportation Code with respect to our subordinates or our personnel. So the first thing is file a complaint. Let us process the complaint without political interference, without being subjective or biased. And then what I would like to do is utilize progressive discipline. Make sure that we have a disciplinary matrix. So if this is the officer's first infraction of the law and policy, then we will have a matrix where that officer knows, hey, guess what? That may be a written reprimand. That may be 1 day suspension versus a couple days of suspension. Because we want them to understand the consequences of violating our policies. We want them to understand that if you violate the law, you will be held accountable, and that we're going to listen to the public. Now, with respect to intentionally disabling a departmental tracking device is unacceptable. That would be considered a major violation, because we don't know what you're doing. What's the rationale? Why are you disabling something that we're using and the citizens are using to monitor our behavior? So if that's the case, then instead of a written reprimand or days off, there may be a demotion or termination with respect to that.
Okay. Community policing versus broken windows policing.
Okay, so what I know about broken windows policing is that stands for the notion that if you have a problem but you don't fix the problem gets exponentially worse. The issue with that is it's mostly reactive and not proactive. And so community-oriented policing is it's a philosophy that Chief Brown, Dr. Brown, brought to law enforcement. And what he postulated is that in order to better serve your community, the police department has to bridge the gap between the community and the community and the police department. And we need to make it smaller, as small as we can get, so that we, as your law enforcement officials, can better protect you, so that we can teach you, so that you can teach us, and so that we can work on keeping you safe, keeping your family safe, keeping your children safe, and help us either prevent or solve crimes. But the community-oriented policing stands for the principle that we can't do it by ourselves without having a collaborative effort with the police department. So, for example, when we talk about de-escalation techniques, when a police officer comes to your scene, what they should do is not instigate a verbal or physical confrontation. They should not instigate an arrest. They are there to be a public servant, to either calm the situation down, establish or reestablish some type of peace, and work that situation out together if you possibly can. So I understand that in some cases, what I see is that chief executive officers or department heads or police chiefs, they use that community-oriented policing as a buzzword. It's the latest and greatest thing, but they really don't bring that home to the community. So here's what I'm going to do to make sure that I address those issues. The first thing I'm going to do is establish a proactive community engagement division. So what that means is that every homeowners association in Fort Bend County's jurisdiction, and to the best of my knowledge is 236, we're going to divide those 236 homeowners associations within a regional command district, and you will have a liaison with each of those homeowners associations. So when that homeowners association say they have a problem in their communities, they can pick up the phone and call a member of the executive staff. That's the first thing that we're going to do. The second thing that we're going to do is similarly with the homeowners association. What we're going to do is assign a liaison to each one of the school districts, so that when they have a problem, we can pick up the phone and they can pick up the phone and call somebody. And I understand that that's a way of thinking that's not common, but this is something that I can do. It will not cost me a lot of money. It's just the vision and leadership that has to be executed. And to further educate my personnel and the community, we have a police academy, Gus George Academy. It is my promise that I'm going to open that up to the public, so the public can take at least 3 classes. One, we have Senate Bill 30. If you know what that is, it's a civilian interaction training that identifies your rights as a citizen when you're being stopped or detained or on a traffic stop with a police officer, so you can understand what your expectations are. And it will further teach you why are those police officers acting in a certain manner they're acting. The next course that I would like to offer to the public is the de-escalation techniques. Every police officer should be a de-escalation expert. But if you as a citizen understand and can anticipate how the officer should act, and if he's doing something that's a departure from norm, then we need to know about it. But if he's following those steps and you understand it, it's better for everybody involved. And hopefully these are some of the things that will help explain to the public why we do things. And the other course that I would like, and this is a big one, every couple of years we have new laws. My job, hopefully, God willing, if I'm elected to be your next sheriff, my job is not to arrest you every time you do something. My job is to educate you, so hopefully you won't even break the law that you didn't even know existed. So in order to combat that specific problem, every 2 years, the state has a course, and they call it State and Federal Legislative Updates. I want to offer that to every citizen within Fort Bend County, so that way you can come and you can say, no, I know the law. And if you know the law, 95% of our population, if they know the law, they will comply with the law. So part of my responsibility as, God willing, your next sheriff is to protect, solve, and prevent crimes, to be a good listener, to encourage and foster or cultivate a relationship between not just you, but with your children, with your families, with the sheriff's office. And we can do this. It doesn't take a lot of money. It just takes vision. And in this particular case, what I need is your vote, because I cannot do everything by myself. I've done everything I needed to do. I've been in law enforcement 21 years. I have a master's degree. I have a law degree. I'm an attorney. I have a PhD that specializes in administration of justice, operating and managing a law enforcement agency. I've graduated from the Leadership Command College of the Law Enforcement Management Institute of the state of Texas. I have a number of years of experience teaching on a college level. I teach and I train police. My philosophy may be a little bit different, so I don't want you to be taken back, but I mean good, I mean well, and if you have any issues or questions, I will have a seriously open door policy. Not where those politicians tell you they have a serious open door policy. I will talk to anyone that is willing to talk to me. I'm sorry, next question.
No, that's fine, that's fine. That's actually something I should have hit on, was the open door policy.
Yes.
I think that's very important when citizens can access their elected officials, especially when it comes to law enforcement when they have concerns. I think that's great. Open records laws in Texas are kind of restrictive on our side of the coin.
Okay, so I'll tell you that I have used the open records law to my advantage to become familiar with the budget of the Fort Bend County Sheriff's Office, its operations, its policies, its contracts, its use of force, its uniform crime report stats, and some of the things I found out that were that we could use some work. For example, 60% of all robberies and aggravated assaults with deadly weapon in Fort Bend County goes unsolved. 60%. We found that 80% of all burglaries of motor vehicles, and thefts go unsolved. 80%. And 13 out of $13 million of worth of property stolen, we only recover $1.1 million. In terms of criminal investigation, currently, according to the budget, we only have 59 investigators. 59 investigators for the largest, fastest growing county in the nation. We can do better. The needs of your community changes everything.
How many patrol deputies do they have? Do you know right off the top of your head?
Yes, actually I do. In the enforcement section, there's 389. In the jails, it's 343. On the bailiffs, it's 43.
343 in the jail?
Yes.
I need to look at the jail population. I didn't realize that their jail population was that large.
Well, remember, part of the sheriff's office, and this is interesting because most people think that it's about patrol, but it's not about patrol. The sheriff is the keeper of the jails. He is the jail administrator. And so this is one of the reasons why I feel like I could be a competent manager for the Fort Bend County Sheriff's Office, because I have the skills, the knowledge, the experience, the training, and the education to manage the $92.2 million budget, to manage the over 800 men and women assigned to the Sheriff's Office. This is something that I believe I can do, and I also am qualified to be the jail administrator for Fort Bend County.
Hold on just a second. Let's let these guys go through. Okay, so I'm just going to give you a chance now to commentate or speak what's on your mind.
Okay, a couple things I want to discuss with you, and the thing that is near and dear to my heart is interference with child custody. If I'm elected as your next sheriff for Fort Bend County, I will have a zero tolerance on interference with child custody or visitation, possession, and or access. If you call us, regardless of whether you're in Katy, Richmond, Pleak, Thomas, or Cola, and you are not allowed to exercise your court-ordered visitation, you will be able to call your sheriff's office personally and directly, and we will get an officer or deputy, to you, so that we can take your report, so we can take your statement, we can get a certified copy of your decree, your court order, and so that we can investigate it. And if the facts are correct, we will be respectful, we will package it up, put it in the file, refer it to the district attorney's office for prosecution. That's what we're going to do, bar none. Right now there's 691 pending cases of interference with a child custody that's just sitting there. Every parent has the right to be in their child's life unless there's a court order prohibiting it. And so I feel like it would be my job that if community is important, your children are important. And if your children will grow up and become productive members of this society, they need to have the equal shared access within the constraints of a court order, if you need that, to share in their upbringing. So that's how I feel about it. I know it's a little to the left, but this is exactly what I want to do. And if I'm elected, that's what I'm going to do.
You got to think positive. You got to project positive. Say, when I'm elected. When I'm elected.
You know what it is, and I get that all the time. But I'm humble, and I understand politics, and sometimes the best and the most qualified person is not the person that gets selected. So this is why I have to say this. I've done everything I can possibly do. I just need the help of the community if they find me worthy to bring me across the finish line. I've done what I've needed to do. I've studied. I understand the sheriff's office. I've prepared myself for additional leadership and managerial positions. I've groomed myself. I've educated myself. I've been a productive member of society. I've served my country. I've done everything I can possibly do. I just need you that's listening to determine whether I'm worthy of your vote. And if you decided I'm not, just vote.
And you're a Gulf War veteran, right? You're a Navy veteran?
Yes, I am.
Oh.
I am.
Okay.
And do you remember the movie Black Hawk Down?
Yes.
I was there out to sea on the USS Acadia. And so when those guys were coming in, it was a little worse than what people think it was. And it was a scary time, but I grew up. The military has done great by me. The veteran benefits are awesome. I grew up a lot.
Okay. One more time, what's your website?
Holland Jones 4, the number 4, sheriff.com.
Okay, and I'll link that in the description, and that is it.
Okay.
I appreciate you taking time to come out and chat with me today.
Ain't no problem.
And I'm going to shut this video off.